Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Friday morning, October 28th. Well, we've talked about how this is often quite an interesting time of the year in terms of the overall weather pattern across North America. You have the winding down of the Atlantic Basin tropical season. At the same time, you have an increasing look to the upcoming winter season with more and more colder than normal air masses typically showing up this time of the year, and sometimes there's a kind of an interaction between the two, between the winding down of the tropical season and cold air influx, let's say from Canada into the central and eastern part of the U.S. We want to take a look at how a western part of North America tends to chill down over the next week to 10 days or so, and the tropics remain active. We're focusing in on the Caribbean Sea right now, which is featuring plenty of warmer than normal water temperatures. We'll show a map of that in a moment here. This is the latest outlook for the next few days by NOAA's National Hurricane Center. Really, two different ways we're looking at right now in terms of the tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin. First of all, there's a wave out here over the western Atlantic. It just tends to meander around over the next several days, probably not going to ever make it to the U.S. East Coast, but of perhaps of more interest is down in the Caribbean Sea. There is a pretty strong wave, and we'll see the infrared satellite image of it in a moment here. Quite impressive, matter of fact. But here is where the Caribbean tropical wave exists right now, and it looks like it'll drift to the west over the next several days, and it may be a slow mover and get into the western part of the Caribbean Sea and kind of meander around there over the next week to two, and that's always a concern whenever you have a strong tropical system, perhaps a hurricane meandering around. You never know where it's going to end up, and at the same time we have colder and colder air masses coming in from Alaska into western Canada and first into the western part of the U.S. But these are the two waves we're watching, and again, closest attention goes to the Caribbean Sea right now, where there's a pretty strong tropical system, and it looks like we may have to monitor it for many, many more days in advance. Well, here's the latest colorized infrared satellite image of the Atlantic Basin, the Caribbean Sea, right in this region right here. And here is that strong wave right now showing up quite well, quite impressive looking in this colorized infrared satellite image. Right here is the disturbed weather in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean, kind of a strung out area. And again, there's a tropical wave in here. It'll tend to meander around over the next few days in this part of the western Atlantic Ocean. This, meanwhile, looks like it'll continue on a westward track over the next several days. Ultimately, it could impact Central America, Yucatan Peninsula region, or just kind of meander around in the western part of the Caribbean Sea. Potential heavy rainfall this weekend. Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti has to watch out for this if it in fact broadens its coverage here. It is, again, quite an impressive tropical system, and sea surface temperatures are still plenty conducive to support a tropical storm or even a hurricane this time of year. Well, we showed this kind of a plot yesterday. This is a sea surface temperature anomaly map of the Caribbean Sea, the western part of the Atlantic Ocean, by the way, available from tropicaltidbits.com. And the last satellite image, the colorized infrared satellite image, was from the CIMSS University of Wisconsin website, which focuses in on tropical activity. Caribbean Sea, warmer than normal throughout. This is certainly conducive to tropical storm formation or intensification, and it can easily support a hurricane this time of the year. And it looks like we have another few weeks at least to monitor the Caribbean Sea and the rest of the southwestern Atlantic. Also, look at here, we have a lot of warmer than normal conditions over the Bahamas and the rest of the southwestern Atlantic. Gulf of Mexico, kind of a mixed bag here. Some warmer than normal conditions, and closer to the coastline, some colder than normal conditions. But again, this morning, the tropical system of interest, of main interest, is right in this region right here. Looks like it'll slide to the west over the next several days, and then perhaps strengthen into a hurricane over in the western part of the Caribbean, may meander around there for a few days. We'll take a look at a model run from the Canadian model and see how, in fact, it does become quite a strong tropical system, and it tends to slow down and meander around the western Caribbean in a week to 10 days or so. Well, let's in fact take a look at the Canadian model run from last night, 0Z. And first I want to look at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies. Again, looks like an increasingly cold pattern for the western part of North America over the next week to 10 days or so. Alaska, western Canada, the western half of the U.S., not too unusual for this time of the year as we get into the early part of November. Let's take a look as we go forward here with the again the 850 millibar temperature anomalies. Colder air mass over the western and southwestern part of the nation kind of sits in that area over the next several days. A lot of warmer than normal conditions here by the time we get in the latter part of the weekend, the early part of next week across the northern U.S., southern part of Canada. A lot of cold air building up over Alaska. Fairbanks this morning, almost 0 degrees already, dropped down to about 4 degrees currently and on its way down to about 0. A lot of colder than normal air over Alaska, and that will head into the western part of Canada in coming days. At the same time, it stays warm across much of the northern U.S., southeastern part of Canada, but look at all this cold air over the western part of North America by the time we get to Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And some of that slides into the western states, stays warmer than normal across the eastern half of the nation and tends to turn colder than normal across the western half of the nation by the time we get to the latter part of next week. This is all the way out to next Saturday, a week from tomorrow, November 5th. And look at this colder than normal conditions extending from Alaska, western Canada, western U.S. Strong surface front likely right in this region right here with warmer than normal conditions across much of the eastern half of the nation. So again, there'll be kind of a dichotomy in the U.S. by the end of next week with cold to the west and warm to the east, and the warm weather in the east extends all the way up into the eastern part of Canada as well. We'll move out a couple more days here. We'll see some of that cold air then dives down into the central U.S., and we'll see eventually after that. This is looking 10 days out now. Some of that may slide into the east, but before it does, certainly looks like a warmer than normal pattern for much of the eastern half of the nation. Well, let's now take a look at the surface forecast maps from last night's Canadian model run, the 0Z model run. Strong high pressure, kind of a Canadian high, and nice air mass now for the northeastern U.S. The mid-Atlantic region looks like a pretty decent weekend because of this high pressure hanging around. A beautiful weekend to observe some of the brilliant colors in the trees throughout the mid-Atlantic, the northeast U.S. Now let's move forward here, and we have, by the way, a cold frontal system headed towards eastern Texas. The World Series begins tonight in Houston. Very likely the roof will be closed because there will be some showers and thunderstorms in that part of Texas, the southeastern part of Texas during the day, maybe even into the night. So expect the roof to be closed tonight for Game 1. High pressure over the northeastern part of the nation as we begin the weekend. This system pulls out of Texas to the north and east and could throw some showers into the mid-Atlantic region by the time we get to Monday. This is Monday morning, October 31st, Halloween Day. The first game in Philadelphia in terms of the World Series will be Monday evening. Could be some showers around. Doesn't look like a real heavy rain event, but certainly could be some showers around. And here we go, down in the Caribbean Sea by Monday, October 31st. This is the Canadian model forecast of the location of that tropical system right smack dab in the middle of the Caribbean. Warmer than normal sea surface temperatures at this time supporting this tropical system. Then we go out a couple days later. This is the shower activity that I just mentioned, moving into the mid-Atlantic region during the day Monday night, into the day on Tuesday. And again, the World Series at this time will be played in Philadelphia Monday night, Tuesday night. Here's that tropical wave at this time. By the time we get to the middle of next week, here we go by Wednesday, 1007 millibar tropical system according to last night's run of the Canadian. Meanwhile, a lot of cold air across western Canada, extending from Alaska into western Canada. Let's move out a couple more days here, and you watch this system intensify here and kind of meander around. We just a moment ago we saw 10.7 millibar low pressure center here. Now it's down to 10.01 in the southwestern part of the Caribbean. Very warm waters at this time of the year. Meanwhile, a lot of cold air. Look at these high pressure areas building up, again extending from Alaska into the western part of Canada. This is towards the latter part of next week, and according to the Canadian model, look at this, just intensified down to a 984 millibar tropical system, likely a hurricane at this particular time. We're about a week away from right now, the end of next week, Friday, Saturday, November 5th, November 6th time frame. Colder air pouring into the north central part of the nation, and indeed the western half of the nation will get cold. By the time we get to next Saturday, we have still warmer than normal conditions in the eastern U.S., colder than normal conditions into much of the western half of the nation, extending from Alaska all the way down into the western half of the nation. By this time, a 982 millibar low. This is way out there now, a week from tomorrow. We're talking Saturday, November 5th, but this is certainly an area that we'll monitor closely, the Caribbean Sea, over the next week to 10 days or so. And the tropical season is not over yet, so it's something we have to monitor. Same time, cold air looks like it'll intensify over much of western North America over the next week to 10 days or so, from Alaska to western Canada to much of the western U.S., while the eastern half of the U.S. and the eastern part of Canada looks like overall a warmer than normal weather pattern over the next week to 10 days or so. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.